Megan, thank you for coming on to talk to me.
Hiya.
It's brilliant to have you on. We'll get cracking into the questions. What is it that sparked your interest in engineering?
So I would say my interest started from when I was really small. So I always used to, instead of going on normal days out with my family, I would always beg for them to take me to the airport to watch planes taking off. So it was really from being very little that I had an interest in sort of engineering and aviation. And then as I grew up, I became more interested in the military side of things, so in kind of defence and aerospace, and really kind of like capabilities on the cutting edge of aerospace. So that's what kind of got me involved to start off with. I was very much in the mindset of to be involved in that kind of area of things, you needed to be very technical. Actually a lot more kind of creative. So I struggled with that a little bit and kind of finding my place in the industry. But yeah, that's what got me to kind of where I am today, really.
Fantastic. And so how did you go about developing that interest? Did you go on to study at college and university?
Yes, so I initially actually joined cadets. So I joined the Air Cadets when I was about 15, 16, and kind of got more experience of what was actually in defence, what kind of air platforms we had and things like that. And then, yeah, I did A-levels in maths and physics, and also English and politics. So I was kind of, like I said, I was more naturally took to kind of more creative subjects, but I knew that to kind of go into a sciencey degree area, I probably needed maths and a science. So I did maths and physics, and then went to university and did a degree in aerospace engineering at Sheffield.
Fantastic. So we'll move on to your what you actually do. So
Yeah.
what are the biggest misconceptions that people tend to have about your job?
Totally. So I think going back to what I said about how I was very much of the mindset of, in order to do engineering, so my role now is a mission planning engineer. And if I'd have kind of looked at that role, and what people say to me a lot of the time is, oh, that sounds really, really technical. And it is, there are some technical aspects, but the biggest thing that I didn't appreciate was that actually engineering is very creative as well. And how I kind of see engineering on the spectrum of a pure maths or science field, and then a creative field. Engineering sits kind of in the middle ground between that technical and the creative sides of the spectrum, really. So on a day-to-day basis, I use technical skills that I learned in my degree. So I use kind of coding, software knowledge, things like that, kind of traditional engineering capabilities. But then I also use, probably more so, my communication skills, my problem solving skills, kind of public speaking. So if I'm presenting at any level, really, I can find myself presenting to kind of a group of people who perhaps don't have the technical knowledge of the systems that we use. And really, an engineer is only it's all very well and good. You could be really, really deeply technical and really great at that side of things. But if you can't communicate and explain what you actually work on to people who don't have a background in it, then you actually, it's kind of worthless, really, what you're learning. So, I definitely say the misconception is that it's just really solely, specifically technical things that we work on. It's not at all. And kind of the strengths that I see I have as an engineer are more of those the softer skills, very much kind of applying creative thinking to problems that we come across.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And the next question I've got for you, so it's a very, very broad question.
Yeah.
Well, no, it narrows down a little bit. What is it like to be a woman in engineering? Do you feel like your gender gives you a different perspective and experience from that of your male counterparts?
That's a great way of asking the question, I think, because sometimes people can kind of subconsciously phrase the question to make it sound like you're at a disadvantage, or make it sound like you're kind of different. For me, I've never really been conscious of it. So I would say, when I step back and think about it, I am in a minority, but I've never really been made to feel as such, and I would never categorize myself really, that I wouldn't say I'm a female engineer, I would say I'm a mission planning engineer, so I don't know whether that's kind of an individual experience. Obviously I can't speak for all women in engineering, but I would say the kind of the real thing that stood out of the experience to me is the community of other women engineers that I come across. Maybe it's because numerically wise we are still a minority, but I've always found really a great community of women engineers that stick together and that will really go out of their way. So some of my greatest kind of mentors and supporters and cheerleaders are from that population. And I think that's kind of a great thing as well, and something that maybe is kind of a common ground. So in my role, I don't just work with people from my company, I work with customers and people from partner companies, so quite a varied population, and something that we all kind of have in common. The people that I work with who are females in engineering, we all have that common experience almost. So yeah, day to day, I wouldn't say that I notice anything different really. Maybe it gets to a point where you are, perhaps the only woman in the room for so long. It was very much the same with my degree, and it was probably the same in my A levels as well, and more of a minority in the population. Maybe it just gets to a point where you kind of don't realise as much anymore. But I will say my company is fantastic as well at organising events and having those networks, so you can meet other similar people. I think we face some perhaps some different challenges almost. I've certainly worked in roles in the past where, like the female toilet isn't in the same building as the building that you work in, but there's a male toilet in that building. So some practical challenges like that. I'd say kind of as you go through life, you have maybe different challenges around perhaps pregnancy and starting a family. But I think, again, the company that I work for is very much, that's open dialogue. It's not a taboo subject. And there's a lot of pathways that are signposted that kind of enable you to maintain that career progression all the way through, regardless of kind of the different areas of your life and different seasons of your life that you go through as well. So yeah, I'd say being a woman in engineering, you do have different perspectives, but I think being anyone in engineering, you do, and everyone's skill sets and experiences equip them differently, I think. So I wouldn't say it's something that really, that I would put down to my gender. I'd say it's more down to kind of individual experiences.
Fantastic. And you went on, you were talking in and went into detail about, how it felt at college to be maybe the minority in the room and at university. What do you think the industry could be doing better as a whole to help promote more women in, to take that path and jump onto more STEM subjects? Just, I mean, you see it already that they are starting, but is there anything they could do more prevalently to promote it as a career path?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to get in right at the very earliest stages. So for a child like me who was really young and saw aviation and aerospace as something really that they were passionate about, nipping it in the bud right then and kind of showing that it's not, I had that preconception basically from the first stage of it's really technical subject. Having kind of more creative perspectives, having role models and representation across the board, not just women in engineering, people from all different minority backgrounds in engineering, having real clear visibility of them from really early stages of primary school all the way through the education system, I think is definitely the first place that we need to start, and really opening up that dialogue to show what engineering actually is, and quash those preconceptions, I think is a great place to start. There's also a lot of different work experience schemes. I think we kind of have them as quite a large company, but I think all different aerospace companies, it's really important to have those stepping stones to give people the chance to experience engineering before, setting it as their obviously you never really commit to a definite career path forever, do you? But before you go to university, make choices like that. I think it's really important to have work experience and understand really what the job is, and have a really well-rounded view of what the job is as well. So I know for our work experience programs, they're designed and led often by members of the early careers population, so graduates and interns who, it wasn't that long ago that they were in the student shoes who will be taking part in those schemes, and having those really fresh perspectives. And again, just so important to have representation across the board in those programs. I think that can create just a way more inclusive environment, really. But like you say, I think we're definitely on the right path with that. And certainly a lot of the STEM outreach activities that I have taken part in and continue to look for, that's sort of a number one thing for me, is looking at who else is going to be represented there, and building that so it's really, really inclusive.
Excellent. So this question is probably a bit more wider spanning than just engineering, but
Mm.
it definitely fits in with the theme and what we've been talking about. And do you feel that in the hiring process, companies or recruiters attending, do they treat candidates differently based on their gender? Have you ever been party to this, or have you, is this not something you've come across?
So I've never had that experience, or certainly visibility of any sort of favourable hiring or anything like that. I think the issue sometimes for me is kind of, I've had it said to me a couple of times, "Oh, you only got that role because you're a girl. You're filling a tick in the box. You're a part of a quota, that sort of thing." So I think sometimes it can be kind of uneducated perspectives on that process, and people who maybe aren't informed of the process. But certainly in the process itself, I've never come across anything like that. Yeah, I maybe I don't have visibility of it, but I'd say very much the experience I've had is your experience, your level of experience, your level of qualification for the job, and overall your attitude is the thing that gets you the job, rather than any sort of inherent, almost, I don't know, quality or anything like that.
Yeah. It is definitely refreshing to see some of the more, I'd say, old school ways of thinking being ushered out as the sort of millennials, Gen Z start to take over the hiring process in these companies, and
Mm.
it's definitely very refreshing.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think, sorry, I was just going to say as well, there's a big drive I know going on sort of within my company, but looking at how the hiring processes themselves can sometimes be almost subconsciously biased in a way. So I remember going to a women's network event where a talk was given from an external party on our hiring language that we used, and maybe some of the subconscious messages we were sending through that weren't portraying what we wanted through a candidate. But when you have when you don't have that insight into what you're actually putting out, then that can almost bias your recruitment process. So I think having more of an understanding of that, again, kind of making sure that the hiring process is really inclusive. You're including language that's actually saying what you want, but also making sure that the message gets to all different people from all different backgrounds. I think there's certainly work being done in that area, and I think that's really encouraging.
and that's something we definitely try to work on, is gender neutral, race neutral language in all of
Yes.
our advertisements. And when we're dealing with a candidate, it's always just on a one for one basis. There's never any
Yeah.
sort of bias put into that. So I'll
Yeah.
move on to my final question for you. This one's a
Mm,
biggie.
mm.
What is the one piece of advice you would give to a young woman interested in pursuing a career in engineering in 2022?
That's fab. I think, oh gosh, there's so many things that I would say. The number one would be to absolutely go for it. Don't let anything hold you back, and be really unapologetic as well in kind of pursuing what you want. A lot of what I'd find for anyone in an early careers population in pretty much any field is you need to be really persistent. And a lot of the time it might feel like you're doing too much, or you're kind of, I don't know, you can kind of have that really bad imposter syndrome and feel as if you're going into something and asking for things that you're perhaps not entitled to. But I would say early careers is the most entitled you're ever going to be to any of these opportunities, because you're so in that learning stage. So just be absolutely unapologetic, ask for all the opportunities. The worst that could happen is that someone can say no, and that's absolutely not a bad thing, you know. So have a kind of clear goal, not in terms of, you know, a 5-year plan or a path of the exact roles that you want to do. Have a real goal in terms of what qualities you have, what skills you have, and where you want to go with those. I know it's kind of said a lot, but in engineering and technology more widely, roles and things that just develop at such a pace that I couldn't say now what role I want to do in 10 years' time, because it might not exist yet, it probably won't exist yet. But what kind of can ground you and give you a sense of identity as you're going into the field is to know what you're good at, as well as know what you're not good at, but know what you're really passionate about and use that as kind of a compass. So any role you can go into, you can make sure it's really aligned with that core passion. So yeah, top tips for women going into engineering would be to be unapologetic, be persistent, and make sure you stay true to yourself and true to your passion.
That's a fantastic message. Well, that's all the questions I've got for you today, Megan. Thank you very much for speaking to me.
Thank you so much, Johnny. It's been lovely.